Hello and welcome to PM Express. My name is Nana Ansakwa. Now, normally on a Thursday, I will be sat in the studio debating my guest. But here I am in the beautiful auditorium of Oxford University. I'm here to talk to Dr. Opon, who's a legal practitioner, and Gidel Ahmed, who's one of the technical team who designed the biometric. Now, I'm here to find out again if CI 75, if indeed it was a mistake. Because here we are with the rules governing us, telling us precisely what to do. And it is clear that some of us did not do it. However, the court case seems to say otherwise. Now I'm here to debate to find out, in plain English, what went wrong. Was it necessary, the CI 75? Hello and welcome back to the program. As usual, I've introduced that we are outside of studio today. Before I introduce my guest, let me remind you that the big question today is CI 75. Was it a mistake? Was it necessary? If not, if yes, well, my guest is here to explain to us. I'll introduce from my extreme left, and he's the one affiliated to Oxford University in East Legon, hence we're here. Now, to my extreme left is Dr. Opon, who's a private legal practitioner. He's also the registrar and chairman of the Research and Training Consultant Institute of this facility. Beautiful place. And then to my immediate left is Ahmed Gidel. He's a technical committee member of PAC, so he was part of the guys who put up all the biometric things together for us. He's also a lecturer of School of Applied Science and researcher into election technology. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, the reason why we're here is, elections for us in this country is almost do or die. Tensions are very high, the stakes are very high, and run up to the 2012 elections. The MPP's candidate is Nana Akufo-Addo, and age had become, one of the political game, age. So age wasn't on his side. So to him, he had played his part, he served his nation, and if indeed he was going to be president, it was a good time for him. So he had to win, he had to campaign well and win. The other side also, wanted to maintain power as it is, within our country. So I think as far as tensions are concerned, 2012 was very high. Then the issue of, the possibility of people voting once or twice came in. So in order to avoid that, they brought biometric. In order to make it law and make all these abiding, there was the famous CI 75. So that we all comply with this law, so that there won't be overvoting, there will be more civil and everything. In any case, the MPP, being the petitioners, took the case to courts because they thought that the CI 75 wasn't fully followed. And we sat through a grueling 8 months. Some people thought, well, it seems obvious. I mean, if people have overvoted and people haven't done this and pink sheets weren't signed, then, it's an open and closed book. However, the law is the law. I want to start with you, Ahmed. What brought about you guys, because you're a scientist,
yes.
What brought about the idea of the biometric machine?
Yeah, the idea of biometric has come up as a result of identity is becoming a very questionable issue in almost all the countries involved in elections. And therefore, it is important to find a way scientifically where we can purely or correctly identify one. And the issue of biometric came up. But before then, when you look at elections, we have different ways which is going on. We have the first one, we have the low tech, we have the medium tech, and we have the high tech. Ghana has passed through all this and get to a point that there is no way they must move to the high tech. And in elections, technology, high tech has to do with biometric, it has to do with e-voting, it has to do with tenant voting. So after moving from low tech, where you use the OMR, the OCR, the medium tech, combining the two, they get to a point that identity becomes a problem. And the only way out is to go to high tech. And that high tech involves the biometrics, or you go for e-voting. I think at that time, others are proposing for e-voting and whatever, but I think in May 2009, I think all the parties, political parties, agreed that they should go biometric with the Electoral Commission. And that was at the time that all of them agreed, and it became possible that Ghana must move on to biometric because of identity issues, especially impersonation and fraud. Electoral fraud, so these are the issues why Ghana move on to the
let me come in. Did they agree as biometric coming in as an extra check? So basically, if I come there, I'm the first check, you look at my card as the second check, and probably ask my name as the third check. Was biometric to be added to those checks, or was it going to be the only check?
Okay, that's the issue now. You see, biometric cannot solve all our identity problems. It's one event that can help, but there are processes leading to that.
Now, you're a scientist. As far as I'm concerned, you guys have told us that my thumbprint is unique.
Yes.
So if that doesn't only solve, what else would you need? DNA? That...
No, we have different aspects. If your fingerprint is not working, we can use the iris, we can use the DNA, we can use the palm. All these are biometric features that can be used. But we use the fingerprint.
So at the polling station,
yes,
the biometric was going to be the final check.
Yes, it's one of those. Because you see, technology cannot solve all our problems. That's the first thing we need to understand. So when you are enacting law, you are coming up with a legal framework of technology. It's important to understand how the technology works. And unfortunately, the way we run the issue of biometrics when it came into play, it get to a point that we are in a hurry. Because look at this. The political parties and the Electoral Commission agree on the 9th of May 2009 to go biometric. But the registration of biometric started in 2012. Imagine. In 2012. So within that time, in March 2012, so you see the time, and we're supposed to conduct an election in December. So the legal framework, the technology aspect that we need to do, all those things, we are in a hurry, in a rush. So we couldn't do a thorough job, to be frank.
Let me bring Dr. Upon here.
Yes.
Doctor, no verification, no vote. And the law says shall. I had I don't know, maybe he's your senior, Okujeto. I'm sure he's going to be senior, Sam Okujeto, the lawyer, on my show. And I said that, if the president went to his constituency to vote, he's the president. We all know him. With or without a thumb, we cannot argue. So if he chooses not to biometric and vote, you have to accept it. And he says, no, the thing is shall. So here we are today. And you're a lawyer. So what does the shall mean? Does it mean maybe, might, if necessary?
Well, I think the first thing we have to know is the word shall means shall. It means you have no choice. If you read the law, CI 75, it says every voter shall go through a biometric process. But it doesn't say that the presiding officer shall only recognize a voter who has gone through the process. So those are two different things. So the shall is for the voter. But as to whether or not the presiding officer has alternatives, different ways of interpreting a malfunction. Or, for example, somebody comes to do a fingerprint, but they don't have fingers. Maybe, they are lepers, and so on and so forth. That decision has been left to the Electoral Commission. So there are two different things. One is he shall go through the process, but it doesn't mean that the presiding officer is bound to straitjacket himself or herself only with the biometric. And if you define biometric to include, as he's saying, iris and palms and even feet, then we have a challenge here in that right now we're only using one system, one method. But let me go back and say something. The reason why we have a problem is because we have a society which in the general is not based on trust. Why can't we trust our driver's license? Why can't we trust our passports? Why can't we trust our birth certificates and so on and so forth? So if we have a general problem of fraud, it's because we have a general problem of policing when it comes to identity, documentation, and so on and so forth. All of that have to be a part of the solution of verification. Because the main issue is not biometric, it's about verification, avoiding duplication, and so on and so forth. So the law is clear. It says shall for the voter, but it doesn't say shall for the presiding officer.
It's the presiding officer.
Can I come in here on the issue of no verification, no vote? You see, I have a problem with no verification, no vote, in the sense that when you are going to enact a law or you are going to come out with the legal framework of technology, you need to understand thoroughly how the technology works. Now, when you look at biometrics, since it's a process, in fact, in my view, when you are enacting the law, you must have a minimum level where there should be an acceptance, because technology, we have the maximum, the minimum, and then within the middle. So if you are enacting such a law, you must understand how it works. So you must read about the technical report, the scenarios, cases that has happened. You must have all those reports so you can really understand. But it's unfortunate that, okay, most of our legal men, when they went and sat down, so let's put the law, no verification, no vote. You see, ideally, technology doesn't work like that. You must have a minimum level. What is the minimum level of acceptance that we can see that one is verified? Because it's technology, and this image quality differ. Because when you are taking up the image of fingerprints, they differ. The quality may differ, partly because of our occupational activities, partly because of the way the machine operates. So therefore, when you are bringing verification, you must know, because the quality of the images are not the same that you have captured. Obviously, your law must also be very clear that, okay, we must have a minimum level of acceptance, because we don't have the image. So that is the problem. You see, it's a really, really serious problem, which I think in the next, as they are talking about electoral reform, we must really, really work on that and get to understand it.
But it's a constitutional provision.
Yeah.
Maybe at the time, without the benefit of hindsight, we didn't do the minimum thing. Do we break the law now and say, okay, now let's go and think and make laws to suit the mistakes that we did today, lawyer?
I don't think there's a problem with, in my view, it's a question of interpretation of the law. And laws are not written in stones. There are different schools of thought when it comes to interpretation of laws. Some people say it has to be interpreted literally. Some people say, no, it has to be interpreted in accordance with the purpose of the legislation. So it depends on who is interpreting the law. If a presiding officer says, my duty is to make sure that every citizen of age, of a sound mind, who is registered votes, this person is here, hasn't voted, is of sound mind, meets the constitutional definition, and I'm going to make sure that she votes with or without going through the process, if I can justify it. If the presiding officer makes that decision at that time, it's an interpretation. He may be right, depending on who is approving that interpretation or not. But I'm just saying this, it's only when you take it literally and you say the literal interpretation is right that we have a problem. But if you allow the presiding officer, or if the EC is allowed to understand that as long as the person qualifies, then he or she will be allowed to vote with.
Dr. Obon, 26,000 polling officers.
Yes.
Everybody going out there thinking that, well, at this present moment, I feel this is right. At this present moment, I feel that is right. That is a danger. So there should be...
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the law says shall go through a process. So the person cannot refuse to go through a process. If the person goes through a process and the machine breaks down through no fault of theirs, or they're incapable of completing the process. See, the law doesn't say complete the process. It says shall go through the process.
Yeah.
So if the person goes through the process and for one reason or the other, it doesn't work.
Then you haven't gone through.
No. That's an interpretation.
There may be some
that is
level.
an interpretation.
Maybe you have gone through some level and it has accepted you.
I mean, you did the biometric
Yes.
verification.
Yes.
And I'm not sure it was there for a design. It was there that when I put my thumb on it, it lights green to accept me.
Yes.
So if I put
But
my thumb on
that
it...
official also, there are two. First of all, your face must come up, must pop up by using the machine to go through your, how do you call it, barcode. And the second one is your fingerprint. So it may happen that your face has appeared, but when it comes to the fingerprint, the fingerprint is not accepted.
So what if I'm an identical twin?
Pardon?
What if I'm an identical twin?
No, when you're identical twin,
Yes.
the only distinction may be the fingerprint.
But the fingerprint is not working.
That's
the
what I'm
face
saying.
is popped up and
Yes.
it's my identical.
Yes.
So you see, that's what I'm
but
saying.
your name is also in the register. We have a register. First of all, you have to use the register to look at your card, look at your name in the register, go through, and then pop up your face, and then use the fingerprint. So all these people.
So then my next question is, what's the use of the machine?
Eh? The machine alone cannot solve all our problems. That's one thing we need to know.
That's why it's called a verification.
Cannot use all our problems.
My understanding of the whole thing is, it's like we said before, if we have ID, because if you look at the law, it says that the presiding officer may also look at the photo ID of the person.
Yes.
And that's why I'm saying that the shall is for the voter, but not for the presiding officer. So, for example, if the twin in this particular case, there's a problem, we've gone through the process, but the process is incomplete or is incapable of allowing us to decide, then we can use other means, and we should other means. But the question then is, what rules and regulations do you lay down?
For the other means.
Right. And that is not an issue of the law. It's an issue of sitting down and making sure, okay, these are the problems that we encounter with the law.
Yeah,
Let's see how we can... Laws always evolve. And they should evolve.
Yes.
I mean, we're not frozen. And that's why we're human beings, right?
The presiding officer, one of his primary roles is to make sure that there's law and order. One of his primary roles there is law and order.
Yes.
He can even eject somebody from there.
Yes.
And so if his primary role is law and order, and he knows that Dr. Pond shall go through biometric verification.
Process.
Process.
Yes.
And the
that
process is incomplete.
Yes. That's
Should
what I'm
the
saying.
process not be complete? Otherwise, why do you go
But
through
are we
the
talking
process?
law? Because if the law says, shall go to a complete verification process, then he has a duty to make sure it's complete. But there's no such law.
Yeah.
So it says process.
It's a process.
It's your wisdom that they left it at that.
Yes,
so he has the duty to go by the law, and the law is a process. So the man goes through the process. He's not able to complete it, but he has to vote. He has a constitutional right to vote.
Yes.
So then what happens?
But we spend, what, $120 million?
Yeah, Kenya spent 95 million.
And we spend $120 million
Yes, Gambia spent
for a
40
process
million.
that you might or might not go through.
No, including the registration, not the biometric itself.
No.
Will cost 3 million.
3 million.
Yes, the
For
biometric machine. Alone.
Machine cost 3 million.
Yes.
So, okay, let's say we spend $3 million for a machine.
Yes.
And it's for as to whether we go through or not go through.
I think the
I'm
problem.
not blaming us. I mean, as a state.
I think the problem comes with the legal framework. We need to look at it again and then redesign the legal framework, because you must really understand how technology works. And if you really understand how technology works, then when you are coming out with the legal framework, then you must come out with a legal framework that is acceptable, that can be used, evolved, like my lawyer is saying, so that it should not be something as if it should become something that will affect us again, and then keep talking about it. You see, you establish a legal framework that is evolved, that the people can use it. So to me, I think we need to go back and redesign our legal framework as far as technology is concerned. Because you see, with the advent of technology in elections, the challenge now becomes, how do we come up with a legal framework? And it's not something that we can do it within a short possible time. We really need to understand the technology. The legal fraternity must really understand how technology works, and they must understand how they can enact the laws of technology. Otherwise, we shall continuously be having problems.
But I see from what he's saying, from the questions that you're asking, a very simple solution. There was an omission, but it wasn't on purpose in the law. And that is, what happens when the process is incomplete? What happens when there's a breakdown?
Yes.
What do you do with a person who is incapable of going through the process through no fault of her own? These are simple questions which would require practical solutions. Once we have these problems now on the ground and we know, all we have to do is sit down with a committee or with a panel and resolve them. And I don't think we can avoid technology. No. We're moving forward. Yes. The problem is the timing of technology and who is in charge and what they're putting into it and so on and so forth. So, for example, we are a poor nation. We want to have a democratic institution free of fraud and so on and so forth. But are we prepared for this type of technology? And if we are not, what are we doing to make sure that we guarantee people's right to vote?
I'm going to take a quick break here, and then when I come back, we're also looking about the law of pink sheets not signed, and what does it mean by if a vote is stuffed or if a vote is overvoting, what does the law say, and what does the practical mind say? Coming straight back. Welcome back, and we are looking at the issue of CI 75 as to whether it was a mistake. And we've looked at biometric. It's a process. It's not a definite. So you can start it, you can probably just look at it and walk past it, and the presiding officer would make a call from there. We need to sit down and really, as the scientists say, iron out the creases and write laws to suit that machine, because it could break down. But I'll start with you now. Let me introduce him again. Dr. Pong is a private legal practitioner. He's also registrar of Nutford University in East Legon, chairman of the Research and Training Consultancy Unit. And then to my immediate left is the guy who was there through thick and thin in designing the biometric machine. Ahmed Gidel was a member of the technical team in PAC, and also a lecturer at the School of Applied Sciences, and a researcher into election technologies. Doc, the presiding officer's role. There were pin sheets that came to court without his signature. Article 49 demands that he signs it. However, everybody else had signed it. There were enough checks and balances on the sheet to say that, well, we've all signed it, we haven't complained, so there's no cause for alarm. Can we overlook it?
I don't think the question is overlooking it as much as what is the appropriate response to it. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the appropriate response to it, you have to look at laws in general. For example, a wrong is committed, and then the judge deciding the case has to, what is the appropriate remedy, appropriate punishment, or sometimes if it is contract law, it's what are the damages. Sometimes the judge will say a wrong has been done, but no damages, or very little damage, and so on and so forth. So the court have to decide, given that everybody has signed, and given the purpose of the signing is to ensure that everything is proper, and he's broken the rule clearly. Number one, it has to be condemnation of non-compliance with the law. But having condemned that act of omission or of the misconduct, the next question is, what do you do? Now, what you do has to take into account what is the purpose of this whole business. That's what judges do. They look at the whole concept, what we're trying to achieve. And if they see that taking a certain decision would allow them to fulfill the objective of the law, they would do that. Instead of saying, somebody did it wrong, let us punish the person and everybody else suffers. Sometimes judges make that decision as well. But the judges have the right to choose which interpretation of the law to decide, depending on their affiliation, their thinking, their experience, the objectives, and so on and so forth. So in my case, my understanding of the thing is there's no right or wrong way of looking at this, except by looking at the purpose of the mischief to be removed.
I stay with you, because you're a lawyer. I'm told that the Constitution, if you're Ghanaian, it's on par with the Bible or Quran, depending on your faith. That's where the Constitution is.
Who told you that?
I was told by Dr. Ampar, who's a lawyer.
I think, with all due respect to him, the Bible and the Quran, of course, are here, and the Constitution is probably here.
No, because you could be a Ghanaian and an atheist. So
well, to an atheist, yes, but to a Muslim or a Christian, the Bible is not a par, or the Constitution is not a par with the Bible or the Quran. Yes. But I understand the point you're trying to make. It's a very important document.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. So, to us,
right,
it's our Bible.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, whatever is said in there is said in there. And it says clearly that, the presiding officer should sign the sheet. One of the things that the presiding officer should do is basically do an account of whatever happened there and hand it over to the returning officer. Now, if he hasn't signed it, which is a clear violation of Article 49, I mean, what is he giving to the returning officer? Who's going to go to the coalition? And based on that, a president is going to be declared.
Very good. The first question you ask yourself is, what are we doing at the Electoral Commission? We are trying to see how many citizens who are qualified to vote came to vote in a proper way. So the question is, was that achieved? That's the very question you ask yourself. And how do we know it's been achieved? Is the signature of the presiding officer the only way of finding that out? If the answer is yes, then of course you know what to do. If the answer is no, then you have to decide, what then do we do given this serious or clear breach of the law? And that is another exercise in mathematics. It's an exercise in jurisprudence. And always, what people don't understand is jurisprudence depends on human beings. Human beings are interpreting the law, whether it's the Constitution or the Bible or the Quran, whatever. It's always human beings interpreting them. And two different human beings may interpret them differently. And that's why you have so many judges. Why you don't have only one judge in the Supreme Court to decide the case, because you have different judges. They come with different opinions, experiences, inclinations, capacities, and so on. And they decide. And when they decide, they have decided.
I'll come to you. And, different people go and vote for different parties.
Yes.
And, I vote CPP, he votes PPP. And he's hoping that his vote has been looked after by somebody that's, nominated by DC to protect his vote, make sure everything went well. That's why he woke up in the morning to go
vote. Yeah. So
at 5 o'clock, you do the collation and everything. And based on that, somebody's declared a winner or a loser. And then you find out that the prefect, the reason why he woke up there, has not signed to make sure that, yes, I agree with what's on the paper, or no, I don't agree with what's on the paper. But based on that, your party loses or wins. I mean, as a citizen, how would you feel?
Yeah, what we need to look at is the totality of the election. Whether the one person or the two people that have not signed, whether really it will mar the elections, the results. Secondly, I am aware that according to the law of Electoral Commission, whether the presiding officer signs or not, for them is valid. They take their results and they go away with it. So with that respect, it's becoming not really necessary for them to say that until the presiding officer signs or not, because according to the Electoral Commission, whether the party agent signs or whether the presiding officer signs, so long as they get their results, it has been agreed, and one or two people have signed, then they will move on with it. So it is not as if though all the people around the results must sign, because sometimes it may be happy there are some issues and one will refuse, even the party agent will refuse to sign, what have you. So according to the Electoral Commission's law, whether the presiding officer signs or not, for them they take their results. So at the point, when you look at what happens at the court, there are some pink sheets which was not signed by presiding officers and what have you. And it's not in our law that they need to be punished or what. And it's becoming also another legal matter. And I'm sure these are some of these things where we need to look at our electoral laws to see how it can be reformed.
If this was a polling station and we finished everything, yes. We have all been very civil here,
yes.
Educated.
Yes.
So we finished voting. Can we just text the presiding officer, say, look, it's okay, everything is fine, send him a text message?
Yeah, but we need to authenticate it.
No,
we have to sign it. We have to sign it.
No, we don't need him.
Yeah.
Whether he comes to sign
that is where the problem is coming down. That's what I'm saying. Yes.
Hi, Dr. Pon, you are the presiding officer.
Yes. Get your results and what have you.
Yeah,
but people must there. The polling agents are there. Observers are there.
No, they are all there. Yes. Polling agent is there.
Yes.
Everybody's there.
Yes.
But the presiding officer, who I think he's the only one literally
who has yes.
Now, if we finish and we send him a text message, say, listen, we've done the voting. The results are 5-4. Give it to the presiding officer.
I think I'd like to come in here because I was trying to make the point. Sorry for the interruption. I was trying to make the point that I agree with you. It is wrong because the reason that presiding officer is required to sign, because the law sees it's necessary for him to validate, to give finality to whatever it is. So it's very important for him to sign.
Yes.
But he hasn't signed it. So a judge has to decide what is the consequence of that. Yes. There are two different types of interpretation. One is against the presiding officer. It's sanctioned against him or her personally, against the office. The second is, what do you do then with clear voters where there's no allegation of fraud, there's no allegation of duplicity and so on? What do you do with that? That's a different issue altogether. I'm saying it could go either way. One judge may say, well, the presiding officer didn't sign, therefore invalidated. Then on the other side is going to be, he didn't sign, but it is clear that 100 people voted, 1,000 people voted, everybody signed, and therefore I so choose. So if we want a situation where we can clearly say what happens when a presiding officer doesn't sign, let's put it down.
Yes.
Law should always be clear. A, B, C, D.
Yeah.
When a presiding officer refuses to sign, the following consequence applies.
Yes.
Been there since 1992 when they brought the presiding officer because of all these things. That if this guy is not there to append his final signature, and like you're saying, we don't even trust our driver's license.
Yes.
I mean, most people are hovering in this country, don't even have a birth certificate. Until one day he gets lucky, he's going to travel abroad.
Then he's moving around.
So for all these reason and multiplication of identities,
Yes.
we bring the presiding officer. Only in 2013, well, your signature, it's not necessarily because everybody else signed.
No. We're not saying it's not necessary. We're just saying, what do you do? What do you do as a judge?
Exactly.
You're deciding the fate of a country. And what do you do as a judge when there's no allegation that, I mean, I'm talking about different issues altogether. We're talking about the issue of the presiding officer failing to sign. No, failing to sign. That's the main issue here.
Okay.
We're not talking about other issues. If he fails to sign, and the judge can say, well, all the evidence is clear that 1,000 people voted. What do I do with these voters? Do I cancel, invalidate, and so on? A judge has to make that decision.
Yes.
I'm saying to you, a judge can say, I invalidate, and he'll be right.
Yes.
A judge can also say, I affirm, and it'll be right. But it's because the interpretation depends on what you're looking at. The mischief to be cured. What will happen if I invalidate? And what will happen if I validate? And that decision is made by a panel of people. Some people choose one way, and other people choose a different way. And if the majority thinks one way, that's the law. Laws usually change. Even the constitutional interpretation of a decision can change with time. In the United States, there was a time where one of the judges said that the white man has no law, has no rights, the black man has no right which a white man ought to obey. 50 years later, in Brown v. Board of Education, that was reversed. The same constitution, same court, different people, different decisions. So all I'm saying is, yes, people do wrong, but the judges have to decide based upon the mischief to be cured. And in this particular case, I'm sure different judges rule differently.
So, you see, 2016 is only around the corner. Now, I know Ashish and I agree that judges will change and everything. This precedent, can you go into an next session with this precedent?
No, we need to...
Because now it's sort of a precedent.
Yes. Wait, it depends on what you're talking about. Which precedent?
That if come 2016, we come and the presiding officer had a running stomach, so this time he even wanted to sign, but he had a running stomach, and we all knew he was literally soiling himself, so we took him away.
No, but this time it's very clear that the omissions have to be cured. Yeah. And that's why I think this program is very important, because you're highlighting the problems. And one of the problems is, what do you do when the person who's supposed to play refuses to play?
Yes.
Right. So there has to be a sanction. But we have to put in safeguards to make sure that one person does not hijack an election. That's why, if you look at the CI, it talks about the agent of the other parties present. And he or she is supposed to...
Even if the presiding officer is not there, there should be somebody acting for him.
Yes.
But also the agents are there. That's why the system has set up checks and balances to make sure that one person doesn't decide. Imagine the opposite situation where everything is nice and dandy. Everybody agrees that all the voters came in, everything's fine. And the presiding officer, I am the presiding officer, I therefore do this. You do something contrary to what the other people have agreed. That situation, you will not say that it should be applied because the presiding officer has signed. No.
But I think there's a provision for the presiding officer to sign and say that I am not happy with the way things went here.
But I'm just saying, what if he does not do what he's supposed to do? That's the issue.
That's
what he's done now.
Right, that's only one aspect of it. But what if there are many things the presiding officer is supposed to do, but what if he doesn't do it?
Yes.
Right? He's supposed to make sure this A is there. So what if he decides, well,
the box is sealed and signed,
there we go.
He has to do all that.
What if he doesn't do that? Somebody has to decide the consequences of same for the election.
Well, he's required by law to do it.
Right. But
so he has to be jailed.
Well, you're dictating the punishment now, but the judges will look at the situation. If you say you should jail, everybody's going to be jailed for mouth. But you know what Jesus said.
Yes.
Let he who has not sinned cast the first stone.
But another area that I think we need to also do with the presiding officer and return officers is the issue of training. You see, some of these problems has come as a result of lack of proper, adequate training. And even the way we do select our presiding officers is also another challenge. And therefore, we need to look at that area. And I am aware in Georgia, what they do is that the Electoral Commission doesn't train them. The Electoral Commission accredits civil society groups to train. And there must be a period. And what the Electoral Commission will do is to certify the civil society group, train them adequately, and then give them back to the Electoral Commission so that we may have some balanced people coming into the field, because it so happens that when the Electoral Commission carries out the training, first of all, the training is insufficient and inadequate. Secondly, there is a lot of limitations by the political parties. You understand? But in Georgia, this challenge came up, and what they did was that the Electoral Commission will accredit the objective civil society. That is another problem. Objective civil society group
to offer the training.
That's a challenge.
Yes, it's also because we do have civil society groups in Zimbabwe who have no objective. We have them. The gynecologist training. Yes, that's a problem. You see, so it's an issue that we have to look at it in this new reform that I'm talking about, so that we can have a very well trained presiding officers and the returning officers who can man our police stations, and then they must also be responsible. We must come up with a legal framework that can also tie them together and know that yes, you are doing this job because it's a very serious job. It's not an issue of you coming out and I'm not signing and you go away.
No, you as a scientist,
yes.
can't you just do one for us? I come here, I want to vote for Mr. Mahama, stick my thumb on his face, bam, done.
That is, we are not talking of e-voting. E-voting is a very serious challenge. It took India 27 years. The idea of e-voting, we can set up a roadmap. We can set up a roadmap, but we cannot begin, how do you call it, e-voting. Now we can set up a roadmap within 10, 15 years. Then we can vote. We can roll out. Yes.
I'm sure they documented all their do's and don'ts.
No, they designed their own machines. Incidentally, India designed their own machines.
They
designed their own machines.
They'll give us the blueprints. This is how to go about it.
They designed their own machines. But are we prepared? Our institutions are all prepared. The training are all prepared. We have so many things we need to do, by the way. It's not only...
the stakes not too high to just jump there. I'm sure we'll do it.
I think...
Go there if you want to vote for Mahama, stick your hand on it. And ping,
it's a very serious challenge.
Well...
Votes done, registered and EC, boom, one vote for Mahama. Done. 10 minutes, you see the votes, click. Probably you don't even need to hide
and then you just get your results immediately when you vote. Get your results.
I think we're exaggerating the problem. This is really not a serious problem.
I don't think so.
I don't think we have a serious problem. Even this past election, I think there was only a few challenges, I would say. We just have to make sure that we learn from our mistakes and correct them. We don't need to go spend millions of dollars on e-voting when people are starving themselves and so on and so forth. We have to make sure we train the citizenry to be honest, have adequate safeguards against fraud, right? And to make sure that this so-called fingerprinting and iris checking and so just a double confirmation of most people's ID. We shouldn't make that to replace ID, you understand? So we should have better ID. For example, now we have biometric passports.
Yes.
And we have biometric driver's license.
Yes, we even have the health service.
There we go. So we're getting there. So we don't really need to spend millions of dollars on all of this. And voting is just a short moment of time where a person goes and does what he or she wants to do. Now, just for objectivity's sake, you said voting for Mahama, voting for this, which is voting for anybody for that matter. I think e-voting, as I see it, it's swift and so on. But look, our telephone systems don't work properly. Our electricity is not reliable. And our communication systems and so on is sometimes less than... You need all of that system. And you need people who are well-trained. He was talking about even presiding officers, a lot of them not being properly trained. Can you imagine... There we go. Can you imagine having e-votes and somebody sitting in some village somewhere? It's going to be a nightmare. Let's just stick to the manual. And
in fact, the only successful country in the world in e-vote is India. The only successful country in the world. In fact, a lot of countries are now certifying their e-voting. In Holland, they are moving away from electronic voting to manual. In Germany, the Constitutional Federal Court of Germany declared that electronic voting is unconstitutional. And even they are recently going for election now, it's manual. There's a lot of challenges in e-voting. What I think we need to do now is to look at what went wrong with our biometric systems. Let us look at it critically. And to me, I think our voter register, there is what we call hierarchy of electoral fraud. Hierarchy of electoral fraud. 1 is inaccurate voter register. Number 2 is vote buying and intimidation. Number 3 is inaccurate tabulation of results. Number 4 is turning of the results. Turn the results. Everything has gone down correctly, but when you go to the strong room, they turn the results. You understand? So we look at all this hierarchy of electoral fraud and see how we can overcome them. In our voter register, in fact, as I speak to you now, there's the need to do an audit, scientific auditing of our voter register. And it is very important. In fact, our electoral process will become incomplete if you cannot tie the voter register with the civil register. That is the National Identification Authority. We need to, there's a mathematical relationship between the voter register and the civil register. And now, because Electoral Commission, if you look at it, they can't do all the work. We have assigned National Identification Authority, and we are spending a lot of money. Recently, $400 million was given to them. Ghana City was given to them. And yet, you look at what they are doing, and look at the voter register. We've spent a lot of money on the voter register. Yet, there's a clear relationship between the voter register and the civil register. And we need to look at that so that you can graduate from the civil register and move on to the voter register.
People on the voter register, I think that's like 14 million people.
Yes.
However, Inland Revenue says there's only 1.5 million of us paying tax. Everybody on the voter register should be 80 and above. So can you imagine? We'll come back and talk
and it's very, very important. We
Let
need
me
to
take a quick break here, and then when I come back, we are looking at overvoting and stuffing, and then we're now going to go to the big crucial question is CI 75. What was the big fuss? Look at the show. Well, welcome back. It's getting very exciting and most importantly, very educative. But let me remind you that Star Ghana, in collaboration with Multimedia, is bringing all these election educations. I have to throw these questions about so that we can also understand from the layman's point of view what actually informed, the decision that came out. And one of the things that we've known that it depends on the day you go to court and it depends on who sat in court. The interpretation can be different. That's why I say everybody's going to have their day in court. But before we went on the break, you're saying something very, very important, which I think we have all missed, and just focusing on tampering. Figures that will change when they get to the strong room, and the number of people even on the voters register.
Yeah.
14 million.
Yeah.
That's more than half of the country.
Yeah. According to international standards, at least you should have half of your country to be on the voter register.
At most?
Yes, at most. Mm-hmm. So, in fact, when you have it above, it is important that you need to...
But we have a big youthful population, though, so maybe
even then, that is an international standard. Most countries, if you look at it, look at Sierra Leone, the voter population is 2.719. You go to Mozambique, it's about 8 million. You go to Congo, DRC, a population of 60 million is about 28 million. So if you go to Zambia, it's about 5 million. People have studied and there's a research on that. So you have to look at it. If you see your population is about 24 million, then the expectation is that you should get about 12, at least maximum 12
Not more than 12.
Yeah, if you get there, you have to look at it critically and examine what went wrong and see how you can.
Safely say there are 2 million people hovering in there who should probably not be there.
That's what I'm saying. We need to do an audit, scientific audit of the voter register. In fact, one of the reform that we need to do is a scientific. There's a framework that you need to go through and then do technology. Auditing of the voter register.
And probably one ID card that does everything.
That's what I'm telling you. There's a need to link our voter register with the civil registry. It's so important. Said that the electoral commission will not be bothering of going so that you graduate from the civil registry because the civil registry register you at the age of 6. Others will be at the age of 14 as we talk now. So by the time you get to 18, there must be a software that will trigger the electoral commission's office that this boy is matured. And there is now 18 years. And then there's a way we do it. A lot of countries are moving. That's what we move. You see, the way we came out with the National Identification Authority is also a challenge. We cannot, it's also another issue that we need to discuss. But it has already come into existence.
So
there's the need to look at that critically. Ghana, we spend so much money on the voter register, we spend so much money on the National Identification Authority, yet there is a mathematical linkage that we can do that. The National Identification Authority, you can't be isolated in identity management. It's not possible. In fact, there's a recent conference in Abu Dhabi, just the beginning of this year, and the issue of identity management is very critical in the developing. If you want to develop very well, you want to have your statistics very well, then there's the need to have a comprehensive data management system where there's a linkage between that. And now we are doing, everybody is doing, look, this biometric, everybody is doing its own things. The National Health Insurance, they are doing their own biometric recently. I saw the Accountant General, Payroll Management, they're also doing their own biometric. WIC, they are all doing biometric. Voter register election, we are doing biometric. And then we come to national, there's the need to have a coherence way of doing these things. And it's very, very important. But we have to begin with the voter register and the civil registry. It's so important.
Wow, that's true.
Yes.
The other thing, now we'll go back to the courtroom.
Yes.
Now, there's three of us here, and we're going to vote as to whether this show was nice or not. And Dr. Opon has refrained from voting. So clearly there's going to be two votes, just myself and Gidel.
No overvoting.
However, the producer comes to check to see whether the show went well, and there's three votes in the box. So clearly, you have to question it. Now, the interpretation is that no, maybe the box was stuffed. One says no, it wasn't stuffed. Someone overvoted. Doctor, will the consequences change if the name change? And should the punishment be different if the name changes? So let's say if 1 year sentence for overvoting, if it's not overvoting and it's stuffing, then maybe it's 6 months. How does it take us to the courts? What's the law says in this?
Well, it's a crime to overvote. So a person who has voted at one place and pretends not to have voted and votes another place, that's a crime. And the crime is very clear. The punishment for that is very clear. Stuffing is when it is not a person voting, but it's someone adding a name or a number and saying this is an additional number, it's an additional vote. And that has to do with official crime and fraud, and so that's a different punishment altogether. So I'm not sure if I answered your question clearly.
Well, okay. I think the interpretation that we got from the court was that if there's three of us and there isn't more than 3 ballot boxes in the box, then they haven't overvoted. They have stuffed the box. If they came and there was 5, then we have overvoted. However, everybody that votes get ticked. So if the ticking officer takes 10 people, even though there were 20 people to vote in that polling station, then he's ticked that 10 people have come to vote. In the evening when we're counting, there's 15 in there. That is stuffing. That's not overvoting.
That's correct.
The consequences of that extra 5, would it be different if it was overvoting or stuffing? That extra 5?
Well, it shouldn't make any difference whatsoever. Because if 10 people have voted who are qualified to vote, and if 5, however it got there, whether by stuffing or voting or wherever, it's not supposed to be there, improper, wrong, that cannot be taken into account in terms of decision making at the local level. You understand? Because if 10 people have voted, 10 people have voted. 20, where do you get the 10 from? And you say people overvoted or it was stuffed, it doesn't matter. Those extra 10 are improper and wrong.
Now, you see, the issue of overvoting per se is a crime, because we expect that whatever is in the box must be what was counted. Now, what happened is that we need to look at the uniformity of that overvoting. Is it pattern? That means, are we going to see that it's only the Ashanti area we had overvoting, or it's only voter region, or it's in the north? Then that now becomes a very critical issue, because overvoting, sometimes it depends on the number. Experts are saying that there is a relationship between overvoting and the ballot stuffing. However, people are bringing this relationship closer. Now, when you talk of ballot stuffing, it's a calculated attempt to really fraud the election. But overvoting can be in such a way that, looking at our situation, developing country, we may see 1 or 2 votes which is over, or 3 votes over here, 4 votes over here. We cannot say precisely that is ballot stuffing. You see, ballot stuffing is a calculated attempt for one to really fraud the system. So when you want to also add overvoting as a crime which is there, then we need to look at the pattern of occurrence.
But then again, this is a failure of technology,
of
the verification process. I mean, the whole point of this whole exercise of CR75 is to remove the possibility of overvoting as one of them. So that if 100 people are registered, verified, then that's it. Yeah. So if you have a situation where you can have overvoting, it means the verification system has failed for some people. You understand?
Yeah.
So again, that goes back to the issue of technology. We're saying that we really need to understand the technology, making sure it is done properly. Because I don't see how you can have a machine, fingerprinting machine, which is verified and people are sitting now, agents and the presiding officer and all of that, and they're still overvoting or stuffing. How does that happen? Unless the box is not checked before we start the process. Unless there's a way of stuffing it in the process. In other words, people are not vigilant, they are snoozing. The agent is not doing his work, or the agents are not doing their work, and so on and so forth. If everybody is doing their work, the machine is working, verification system is working, there should not be stuffing, overvoting, and all that.
Yeah, but Doc, you see, there is no perfect elections all over the world. It has never been a perfect election. So one way or the other, you do counter some of these things.
But they'll be minor, they'll be small.
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Irrelevant.
It depends on the quantum and the pattern which occurs. You understand? I can say, oh, is this minor, or this something that it can, okay, let's see how we can rectify it.
So then what do we do? You say anything up to 10, we turn a blind eye.
Experts,
from 11
yes,
and above,
yes,
we start
there is
looking.
an argument by experts that it will depend on how you now how do you call it, count it. Whether you say, some will say, okay, anything beyond 100, then that is ballot stuffing. But around 2, 3, we call it overvoting. Anything below, you see, the experts are not
in danger?
In conclusion.
Are we in danger with the beautiful language of English, which you are able to say anything in a very nice way, ruining our own laws and setting different precedents for us?
I would disagree with him. With all due respect to my brother, I would say any overvoting or stuffing discounted. Should be discounted, period. So we wouldn't reach the number of saying it is allowed. We should not allow it at all.
It's never allowed. It's not allowed.
But then we don't have a problem. If that's the case, we don't have a problem. We only go with the ones that have been verified.
No, but in this case, it was... No, but in this case, they were allowed. And, there were boxes there that, if I tally the number of people who voted and everything, and there were some over by 1 or 5 or 6 or everything. But they went through because there were no overvoting, they were stuffing. And I'm saying that with a beautiful language, as English is, and you can say this way and say that way, we are overlooking and setting our own principles and sort of disobeying our own laws.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, that what we are saying is indeed true. Nobody can say that, okay, let's allow it to go. We need to look at it critically and examine and say, should we disallow it and then look at it, or should we let it go and look at it? Whichever way you want us to take it. But the way people are now talking about reform, since we've now been to the court and the court has ruled, then we come back and then look at it and see how now we can bring changes, we can bring the reforms, so that at least if that thing occurs again, then we know exactly how we
reforms. I like reform because it was reform that brought biometric. It was reform that brought the presiding officer. Yes. It was reform that brought the biometric.
Yes.
All these things.
Yes,
okay. Yes. So come 2012, all these things that brought about the reforms, with the benefit of beautiful English, we are able to look at the spirit, the emotion, the soul, and everything, and then overlook it. So when we bring these new reforms, what other words are we going to find to overcome these reforms? Because we will flout it, because we always find a way to flout it, and then we'll come and say, in Zimbabwe it was this, so let us look at the spirit and flout this one, and then make another reform for the next 4 years.
What you need to understand is that, like I keep saying, we started this election in 1992, but we keep every time there's a reforming.
Yeah.
We cannot be perfect.
No.
Every time we conduct an elections, we see some, some mistakes here and there. We come back again. And then move on.
Yeah, we're running out of time, so I need to push you.
To be very, very...
Doc, it was a reform that brought the presiding officer, so that we supervise it. However, today we are told that, other people signed, it was checked, everything was okay, so we can let it go. So this is a reform. So if today we write another reform to say that the biometric is not a process, but it's a definite, and we come next year and we can also say, the law is not definite. So we keep making excuses for ourselves to break our own rules.
I think the most important point is we cannot stop changing. We have to change. We have to reform. We have to evolve. That's the first thing.
But what we have changed, if we have flouted it, then what's the point in moving forward?
Not all of us have flouted it. There's been some people flouted it. A few people have flouted it. And the court has had to decide what to do as a consequence of that. And they've made a decision. Each case is different. We correct our mistakes. We move on with better reforms, better checks and balances.
But there hasn't been any consequences.
There have been consequences. I mean, people went to court, some lost, some won.
No, but nobody's been punished, or nobody's been told of for doing anything.
Because
EC
I
gone
think
up
that
to
question-
do his well.
that
EC is not
question-
his boss.
Yes.
He's still the boss of the EC.
Right, but the question was
presiding
not put-
officers are still there.
Yes. But we need to reform.
But that
because
question was not
is
put before the
usual.
judge. I mean, the judges were not asked what to do with the EC boss or what to
Yes,
do with
yes,
the presiding
no,
officer.
no.
They said declare or decide on this particular
all,
election. If
yes.
that issue is brought before the court, I'm sure they deal with it. But the point is, we have to change. So we
Yes.
can't say because we made mistakes, we're not going to do something better. We have no choice but to do that. And I think we can reform.
Yeah.
All we have to do is sit down. We made mistakes 1, 2, 3, 4,
Yeah,
5.
let's look
Are you
at
saying from 1992 to now we haven't made progress? We
We have
have.
made- yeah, we have made-
And
we have
we
made.
continue to make
Yes,
mistakes,
yes.
but we have to
We
learn
have
from our
to learn.
mistakes.
We have to
We
learn.
have no
I
choice.
think there's room for improvement.
My issue, and I go back to it again, is that we move from, opaque boxes to
Yes,
transparent
yes.
boxes and everything. We got here, and we got to biometric.
Yes.
And the whole idea of biometric is to narrow it down that it's you that's voting.
Yes.
But then he said, it's a process. And I like the word, process. So come next year, and this was a reform done years before, so we
Yes.
get here.
Yes.
We flout the same thing and says, it's a process.
No, but you see, you have to use the word.
Not all of us.
That's right.
Not
All of us have flouted.
Not all of us have
No, but that's
flouted.
what the
See,
Supreme
we need
Court
to-
says.
yeah, no, not all
Well,
of us.
that's the decision from the Supreme Court.
The
And
Supreme
that's
Court didn't say
Supreme.
all of
Yes.
us. It didn't say that all of us flouted the system. Some did flout it.
But the votes count.
No, but what's the consequence of that? See, that's a different interpretation altogether. The
Yes.
Supreme Court has to decide what to do given these set of facts, and they
Circumstances,
decide
yeah.
based on the facts. But they're not saying a rule on all the
All the
malpractices
elections,
in
yeah.
the
Was
election.
CI 75 was irrelevant.
It was relevant.
It was
very relevant.
It was relevant.
But
relevant.
it was not perfect, and nothing
Yes.
is perfect. And we
That's
have to
what
learn
I'm
from our
saying.
mistakes
Yes.
and move forward. And I think we've done very well.
Very well, very well.
We didn't
very well.
fight. There
Yes.
was a
Yeah, no,
peaceful
no.
adjudication of the matter. NPP, the opposition lost. They congratulate the president to move forward. We
Yes.
look forward to other parties in next elections.
Yes,
When they lose, we do similar things, and then we have a peaceful country and we move forward. But I can tell you this. Laws are interpreted by human beings.
Exactly.
The greater the human beings, the greater the interpretation. So we should always make sure we have great persons as presiding officers,
Yes.
as our judges,
Yes.
as our lawyers, as our electoral commissioners.
Yeah, another thing that we also need to look at, as people are calling reform, I understand electoral commission has written that people should write proposal, which I quite disagree with the electoral commission, because we've gone through biometric voter
30
register.
seconds if you wrap up
We've
for
gone
me.
through the biometric voter register. We've gone through an election. What we, the citizens, expect from the electoral commission is to give us a report of what went through the biometric voter register went through, what went through the elections. Based on that, then we can also analyze it, and then we can look at what we can also write on proposal. But as we speak now, we don't have any document from the electoral commission, and we cannot, based on the court verdict, and then we just say that people should come out with a proposal. I quite disagree with the electoral commission, because we need to get those reports, and based on those reports, it can give us an informed decision that we can also contribute to the electoral commission and know exactly where we are going.
Thank you very much, gentlemen. But that's going to be difficult because the EC said nothing went wrong. I mean,
No, but we need those reports.
Well,
they're very, very important.
I promised you a heated debate, and I hope you got a heated debate. And
Yes.
most importantly, educated, because I have been educated. Thank you for watching PM Express. And as I always say, tomorrow we'll be back to do it all over again.